There are a myriad of independents and micro brands in the sub $1,500 space. Finding a watch in this space can be a daunting experience because of the sheer number of options. Is the brand worth considering? Are their watches any good from a quality perspective? What does the watch say about you? And will they be around in 5 or 10 years to service your watch? Today, I'm taking a look at some of the most mentioned, most talked about micro brands and independents in the value space. I'm sharing my perspective on the watches that I've had experience with and where they are as brands and what you should consider before handing over some of your hard-earned cash. Let's dive in. Yema are independent and not quite a micro brand anymore. They are a French brand based out of the small town of Morteau, a few kilometers from the Swiss border and not far from the factories of Breitling, Tudor, Zenith and a ton of others. Morteau is a watch town. One of France's best watchmaking schools is in Morteau, and Yema exclusively hire trained watchmakers. Their staff have extensive experience from the French watchmaking scene, and several also come with long tenures from brands like Patek Philippe. As a brand, they are what I would call a broad brand. That means that they by now have a complete lineup that appeals to the broad public. They are not a niche brand catering only to artists or architects. This is a brand that has a fairly conventional design language with a solid integrated option, a strong diver, a chrono lineup, a tool watch, and an even dressier option. Throughout their lineups, there is a consistent design language. Their designs lean towards the retro end of things with a few diversions into edgier territory with the use of things like black and camo ceramics in some models. As an example, the navy graph is a good representation of the aesthetic that they're committed to. Most of their watches are quite slim. They generally avoid thick boys. Dials are toned down and restrained. They lean towards a more toolish look on almost all watches, bar maybe the dressier Grand Bay. They play around with stone dials and other details, but they never go overboard. There is this core restraint to them that makes for a lineup that leans into the tool watch kind of storytelling. Just like Tudor, they have watches that have been commissioned for the French Marine Nationale Corps. Strengths. The completeness of their lineup is a clear strength. They're not a one-hit wonder. They have a solid back catalogue and there is a consistency across their product lineup. They use solid workhorse movements and make their own. I'll get to that. Cases, bracelets, dials are really well machined to put together. You don't always get the newest of the newest clasp adjustment mechanism, but they do what you need them to do. As a brand, they've been investing more and more in terms of going in-house. They have different versions of their CMM movement, and they have invested heavily in both machines and capabilities to make these base movements themselves. The CMM 2.0, for example, is an in-house developed and built model that has -3 to +7 seconds of accuracy. It's also slim, which is a big thing for them in general. It has 70 hours of power reserve, which is wound by a tungsten micro rotor. The finish with this black galvanic treatment is also a million times sexier than most silver style Solitas you see out there. It adds a little bit of cost, but their movements are just massively more interesting than any Solita with a custom rotor. Weaknesses, not a fan of their Granville dress watch. I think their designers are at their best when they do chronos or some kind of tool watch like the Urban Traveler, the Nagu Graph, or the Superman. Because they're investing more and more in their own movements, the catalog below 1,500 euros is thinning out. You can still get versions of the Superman, the Urban Traveler, several chronos, but the really cool stuff is above 1,500. Who are they for? Yema have all the options you need, but unlike a brand like Monta, their designs are more distinct. They don't go for big and chunky. They don't go for ostentatious. They go for restrained, slim, elegant, but still functional tool watches. In a sense, they're very French. It's not the tank-like nature of a Zin or the over-the-topness of Hublot. It's calm, it's self-confident with an old-school charm. Because they're leaning so heavily into their own movement manufacture, movements are also a selling point. If you don't care about that and what's going on the inside and how that looks, part of the charm of Yema will be lost on you. Hopefully my channel and content isn't lost on you. If you're new here, subscribe, please. It means a ton. And to those of you that are subscribed, the fact is I triple my number of subscribers by asking people to subscribe. 20 seconds of the video is a good investment for me. So thank you for bearing with me. Back to the video. If you are on the Morgan Stanley list, you are no longer a micro brand, but you can still be independent. And with over 40,000 watches sold last year, Christopher Ward is a big player, and as big globally as brands like Oris in terms of volumes, and they even sell more than Zenith. You can look at Christopher Ward's lineup and come to two conclusions. You could see that they have a broad lineup that appeals to many people, divers, integrated bracelets, chronographs, GMTs, field watches, simply a complete lineup with something for every middle-of-the-road customer. But you could also be critical and say that they are kind of Omega-esque in terms of just having millions of options. That's not in itself a bad thing, but when you have a lot of options, you do risk your lineup looking a little bit bloated and lacking of direction. And I do think there is a case to be made for that perspective, because they do have those core models. But for this last year, they have definitely been about variety and limited editions and collabs and one-offs. I've always felt that Christopher Ward's weakness was the brand's storytelling, and this very diverse catalog doesn't come across nearly as consistently as Yema do, just as an example. But they do two things that set them apart from a lot of other brands in this space. First, they have always leaned heavily into value for money as a selling point, more so than a lot of others. The brand, to a lot of people, just isn't sexy, but you can't really argue that the sheer wealth of features they offer and the build quality of all their components is to a very high standard. They are, if not class leading, then they're at least at the front of the pack. The other thing they do is what they themselves call good, better, best. Essentially, it's the Seiko model, where you have good, affordable options at one price point, but you can get more at a higher price point and even more at an even higher price point. The CW12 is available in the entry model with a Solita movement. Then you can pay more and get a COSC certified movement with a titanium case. And you can go even higher, where you can get the Loco, which is a fully in-house movement with all sorts of bells and whistles. One of the strengths of CW is that from a pure feature set, they are, if not ahead of the rest, then they are at the front of the pack. Build quality of their bracelets at any price point is incredibly high. Bezel action, lume, dial detail. They are just incredibly solid and regularly give higher-end brands a run for their money. Weaknesses in their good and better level of watches, their watches look a lot like so many other brands. Comparing to Yema that I just spoke about, the Yema Wristmaster looks very much like an original design. I have a hard time finding another brand where I can say, oh, it looks just like that watch. But Christopher Ward, the 12 looks like a Royal Oak, looks like a Chapek Antique. I know there's a legitimate reason for that. Zenith Defy. It's a much more conventional take on an integrated bracelet watch. And the same goes for the Sandhurst, June, the Sealander. And to be fair, I'm not saying that they're pure homages. They're not. But the choices they make for designs that are good, but not particularly or not heavily distinctive. It's this middle of the road, broadly appealing design language. That's what Rolex does, and that's not a bad thing. But just like people think Rolex can be described as boring, then so can Christopher Ward, at least at this good and better place. On top of that, although I regularly speak fairly positively of them and what they're doing is clearly working for them, I have zero emotional response to the brand. Rolex evokes a response. Tudor does, Furlan Mari does. Christopher Ward, though, come across as a blank canvas, which I think for some people will be a weakness. For others, being free of all that filler is actually what appeals to them. Christopher Ward will appeal to you if the concept of value for money appeals to you. You buy a Toyota not because you love the storytelling of Toyota. There barely is any. You buy it because you get a lot of car or a lot of watch for your money. Buying the Belcanto or the Loco is about getting a lot for a little. It appeals to the value-conscious person, the person who likes to stick it to the man. And in that sense, they are in many ways like San Martin. Value for money and very little emotional filler. In the good and better space, they're also targeting those of you that like those classic recognizable designs and design tropes. Some weird Doxa case or Seiko Willard case with an off-center crown is not going to lure you in. You have a mental image of what a diver or field watch should look like, and that's what they offer. Baltic present themselves as vintage-inspired watches, and that does hold true. They are a brand that lean more to the dressier and simpler side of things. They do have divers in their lineup, but they aren't a tool watch brand. They are just like JLC, just at a different price point. Their content is structured around classic dress and dress-adjacent watches. It's the Hermetique, the MR, the HMS, the Scalegraph. They are all simple, elegant, dressy options with a touch of flair. They've got an offset sub-second dial, tuxedo dial here and there. And when they do offer a diver, it's in the skin diver vein and not the contemporary desk diver style like a Longines Hydro Conquest or a Submariner or a Polaris Ocean. They keep their prices low. They do that not by sacrificing quality, but by keeping things simple on a couple of fronts. Where some brands will opt for more robust Solita movements, Baltic leans more heavily on Asian movements like Miyota that are typically a little bit cheaper, a little bit less accurate out of the box, and with a little bit less adornment. They keep the case finishing fairly simple, which works well with a retro aesthetic. Tons of chamfering and polish that drives up the cost is often kept to a minimum, and more often than not, the watches are offered on straps, not bracelets, and that's to keep the listed price a little bit lower. Adding a bracelet will typically tack on about $100 to a Baltic, which is not huge, but it does add up. So excluding it from the base price does give the feeling of a low price point. Baltic do retro designs really well. If you know your onions, you can see where they draw inspiration from, but they stay at the inspiration level and add their own personal touch. And I don't feel they drift into homage territory. Their strongest options are definitely the dressier options, with the HMS and Hermetiques being my personal favorites. They've got a good brand positioning, which speaks to a very specific kind of buyer. They are not for everybody, which I think is a good and deliberate choice. They don't try to do what so many others do, and it pays off. And they don't just have an integrated watch, not yet at least, just because that's the popular thing right now. And I like that they don't come across as chasing trends and customers. They use Miyota and Hangzhou movements a lot. The Miyota movements are decent, and more importantly, they are easily serviceable. That's important. The Hangzhou, however, is going to be a little bit harder to service. It's not as ubiquitous, so finding a watchmaker that carries the right parts may be a challenge in some countries. It is where I live. The divers they have are perfectly decent, but they're not the brand's core strength. They are best when they do the dressier options. Who are they for? You buy Baltic because you're a creative type. In some ways, this is in the realm of the nomos buyer. Arts, architecture, but more Renaissance and less Bauhaus. If you like their brand now, you were definitely wearing flannel, sported a beard, and got into craft beer a couple of years back. Khaki and leather fold-over backpacks might be your thing right now. You might even have a sketch pad and charcoal, and I could even see you sporting a cigarette and asking Parisian ladies if they will allow you to sketch them. That's the vibe they give off in their position and marketing. San Martin are an options brand, and by that I mean if they think it will sell, they will offer the option. You can even tell from the way their website is structured. They don't have categories of divers with a special name and dress watches with a special name and G&Ts with a special name. It's just lists: SN001, SN011, SN112, SN113, and so on. There's zero attempt to structure their products around a clear theme or story. It's options at low prices. The options lean more towards sports watches and dive watches simply because there's more demand for those kinds of watches. I've long had the belief, and it's since been confirmed, that San Martin's business-to-consumer business mainly functions as a showcase towards companies that would like to buy cases, bracelets, or complete watches from San Martin for their own labels. And I think this still holds true, and you see it in their lineup. A few years back, they were almost entirely homage-based in their product lineup, but now you see more options in terms of bracelet options, dial options, materials, and finishing levels. They basically communicate to the world what they have, and you can mix and match as a customer or as a consumer according to your needs. There is zero attempt to apply any veneer of marketing to their brand. Their pitch is, see what we can produce. It's good, right? Okay, now pick the one you like. And that's a good thing, because there is a customer for that, where brand and marketing and positioning and storefront are entirely irrelevant. Strengths? San Martin by now makes some of the absolute best bracelets and clasps out there. The level of precision for the price, finishing, sheer features allow them to punch far above their weight. And if enough watches go through your hands, you start to notice components in some name brands that have eerie similarities to San Martin's components. They also have a lot of options, mainly in divers and sports watches, but if you want a middle-of-the-road standard diver with a fully gradated bezel, a blue lapis lazuli dial, and a Jubilee bracelet, they likely have that configuration on offer. Weaknesses. What is original? I said there were Christopher Wards that take inspiration from recognizable watches. I also said that Baltic have design cues which are clearly inspired from other watches. How is that any different from what San Martin do? I think there is a difference, and you are free to disagree, but to me, it's because the starting point for San Martin often is a highly recognizable case configured with a highly recognizable bracelet, throwing on a recognizable stone dial, Seiko hands, and a Tudor FXT style bezel. That doesn't make a watch original to me, and it is down to that strategy. It's about those options. To San Martin, building a cohesive catalog with a clear, consistent design language is not important. What is important is showcasing what they can do. So if they want a Rolex Oyster case with a Tudor style bracelet with Seiko hands and anthracite dial option, then they'll do that. There's no design governing their choices. It's options. I'm totally aware that for some of you, you will potentially be angry with that kind of statement. Call me a snob, maybe. But for me, at a business level, I see it as a weakness. Not for their business-to-business model, but for their business-to-consumer model. Because any other Chinese factory could copy this approach. Any Chinese factory could open up a shop next door and offer the same options. Without the packaging, without the narrative, without the branding, without the catalog building, everything they do is vulnerable to competition. There's nothing that keeps anyone loyal to San Martin. It's the literal opposite of Rolex. Because here you just go to some other brand that has another weird name and some odd logo if their options are cheaper or better spec'd. Who are they for? You are value conscious. You are not beholden to the brand. You do not care much about the innards of the watch. For you, you want the most bang for your buck in your watch on the visible parts, and you will send your money to the brand that will deliver. You are likely not loyal to San Martin either. You will switch if some other brand has a better option. You have a level of rationality that I actually admire, because I am a sucker for branding. You aren't, and that allows you to be flexible where you send your money. I would bet that the one thing that gives you the best feeling is being able to say, I got a really good deal. And San Martin and brands like them give you exactly that, a good deal. If you had asked me a couple of years back, I would have called Studio Underdog a one-hit wonder. Their thing was quirky fun dials in simple cases with Chinese movements. I honestly thought this approach didn't have legs. I thought people would tire of the colors and the quirky fun marketing. But last year, they sold 14,000 watches. That's a lot. Calling them a one-hit wonder just isn't fair anymore. Some might feel that they're a one-trick pony, and I suppose you could say that they are, but then again, so is AP with the Royal Oak. Their current state is one of being a brand that has a clearly defined niche, which is about colorful, playful, but not cartoonish watches. As they've gotten bigger, they've also taken steps to improve quality, improve finishing, improve customer service, and largely they appear to be succeeding. Their goofy pandas, watermelons, guacamole speak to a lot of people who are tired of the slew of boring black dial divers with black bezels and 3-link bracelets. Their assortment in terms of cases is fairly limited. And the funny thing is, most brands are defined by the case and the bracelet. So the Seamaster, the Submariner, the Carrera. But for Studio Underdog, it's the dial that defines the watch, not the case. You can say what you want about the brand, but Richard and the people behind Underdog understand color and creativity. In my opinion, they do it better than most other brands. Their closest competitor, in a way, is Swatch. And in my opinion, Underdog do a better job of working with color without making toy watches. They are also really good at marketing. Richard knows how to tell a story and knows how to shape a brand, and it shines through. Their collabs with brands like Fears and Sartori Billiard show an understanding for positioning and complementary branding as well. As for weaknesses, the seagull movement inside is not bad, but it's not the best either. I've owned a few watches with the seagull movement, and they are a little bit inconsistent. The Underdog is a bespoke version, but reliability-wise, there are better options out there. That's one weakness. The other, pricing. Not so much for the entry models. Things have gotten more expensive, and Studio Underdog haven't just raised prices for the sake of raising prices, at least not to my knowledge. But when they make a watch that's almost $2,000, that's a lot when you're used to $600. They have the Series 3, which is a mono-pusher chrono with a Solita inside. The Solita inside is the same elaborate movement you will find in almost identically priced Hanhart chronos. So in that sense, the price is completely comparable, but I would have preferred Underdog to stay in their low-cost lane. Their charm was in being affordable. Underdog are also not in the same race as Christopher Ward. They don't have a strength, sort of comparatively, in quality or components. They aren't chasing the value crowd, and that's okay, but quality and specs are definitely less a strength for them. Who are they for? The $600 watches are better mechanical watches with much more class than a Swatch because they aren't toy watches. But you are still buying it for the fun of it. There's no pretense. There's no old school watch snobbishness. There's no attempt to class things up. They are fun. They are joyful. They are a fun party shirt. And you know it. You were 26 and you had a shirt like this. It was the one you wore when you were going out to pull. It had parrots or umbrellas or pirates on it. It had flowers and a tiger and maybe shiny buttons. So it's a special occasion watch, a talking piece watch, and I'm a not like the rest of you watch. To me, Maen is a little bit narrow, but they are trying to ensure that all their offerings are strong. That can seem a little bit harsh, but I do believe I can make a case for it. Their best watch, by far, is the Manhattan, followed by the Hudson. The Manhattan is an integrated bracelet watch that gets its inspiration from a Vacheron Constantin from the 1970s, the Royal Chronometer. I've tried it, not the Vacheron, the other one. I've reviewed it, and it's fabulous. It is knocking on the door of homage territory, but because almost no one knows about the Vacheron, they get a pass. It is, after all, not a homage of a Royal Oak, a Nautilus, or an Overseas. The second best watch is their diver, which I have had hands on as well, a prototype model, the Hudson Mark V. Their lineup in general gets its inspiration from different sources, but Universal Genève definitely seem to deserve some credit. Where the Manhattan and the Hudson stand out, the others just don't yet. They are all attractively designed watches, but they don't stand out, and Maen don't quite come across as having a fully fledged design language across all watches and fully unique to them. Right now, it's a bit of a two-hit wonder to me, and that can change. You can consider it an assessment of where they are in this very moment. If they lift the other watches like they've lifted the Hudson and the Manhattan, then things slowly start to change. The Nico watch, as an example, wasn't to my personal taste, but if they keep trying, I do think they will definitely end up having they'll have potential to develop a fully fledged lineup. As for strengths, I could say this about a lot of brands, but Maen use good components, they source good parts, and their watches are really well spec'd. More so than Underdog, I'd say. You just get more watch. Solid Solita movements, ceramic bezels, Le Jeu Pareil as well, consistent bezel mechanisms with satisfying clicks. And although I think they're more dependent on the Manhattan and the Hudson for enthusiast cred, this sort of through and through retro Universal Genève charm is a good one. Weaknesses, I can find similar watches in the space that I could recommend just as easily. They've got a little bit of a narrow lineup right now. Who they're for? You want retro, you're more sporty than the Baltic buyer. There's less craft beer to this brand and a little bit more vintage Morris or bio wine and orange wine. That, or you're a tax lawyer with transfer pricing as your specialty. Formex have actually been around for a long time. The people behind Formex are also behind companies that supply components to high-end brands. The watches that Formex produces come out of the same hands and same machines as those that produce for Girard-Perregaux and Hublot. This shines through in a lot of ways. Formex are a tool watch and a sports watch brand. They have four watches, the Essence, the Reef, the Field, and the Stratos. These watches are unashamedly masculine. They are tool forward and they're spec'd out. Formex do not do, not yet at least, dress watches. Formex are not going to make a chiming mechanism watch. It's tool watches with a strongly aggressive shape to them. They're not flashy like Hublot, but they are aggressively designed. They like their angles, and they have functional features like the Essence that has a case that flexes together with your wrist for comfort. They also do really good dials. Again, this is because of who is behind the company. So they do a gold-plated meteorite dial that retains the character of meteorite, which is not easy to do. They can cut stone dials. That's also not easy to do. You also get things like interchangeable bezels, which is monster cool. That's Formex. Their strengths are cases and bracelets and dials. They're just phenomenal. They are class leading for the price, in my opinion. What these guys do, the level of precision they offer at that price is really impressive. That's by far what I see as their key strength. As I see it, there are two things that hold Formex a little bit back. The Stratos is a good example of it. I've met their CEO. He's a really cool guy. He knows a ton more about watches than I do. Their designs are 100% original, not like, no homages whatsoever. But the Stratos is not great. The Essence Ceramica, super cool, but it's by far at its best without a skeletonized dial. And I've always had this theory that I apply in my work, and it's this. Designers overemphasize design and do not understand engineering, and engineers understand engineering and underestimate design. Not exactly groundbreaking theory, because you've probably thought this thing yourself, but their watches are so clearly showcases of what they are good at from a production perspective. They do lack a little bit of design refinement. It's when technique is in the front seat and aesthetic takes a back seat. And I feel there's a little bit of imbalance, and I would love to see more balance between the two priorities. Who they're for? Maybe not wraparound Ray-Bans, but we're getting there. Throw on a t-shirt that exposes your military service tattoo. Throw on either camo pants or Japanese salvage denim. then a Formex is going to feel right at home on your wrist. It's that simple, it's that active, tool forward, slightly aggressive, but not flashy aesthetic. This is a watch brand for manly men. For the moment, Dennison are still a one-hit wonder. They received recognition at the 2025 GPHG Awards for the ALD model with the Tiger's Eye dial. Currently, the ALD is their only watch, at least in case. It's the same case, different variants of dials and movements, including a dual time model, which is kind of cool with 2 dials on the case. I'll show you a picture. Dennison are not going the route of somebody like Christopher Ward or Maen. They're more like Studio Underdog in the sense that it's their very distinctive niche that they're hoping will propel them to success. The deliberate choice to offer both steel and gold-plated PVD cases speaks to what they're aiming for. This is vintage, this is 1970s, it's very old school, it's very niche. Strengths, I have a really hard time finding anything that quite resembles them. This kind of square case in a small form factor and ultra-thin design is not common at all. The closest I can think of is the retro Seiko recrafts that came out a few years back with the likes of the, I forget the number, I'll put on a picture. It's not quite the same, but it's ballparky the vibe that I get. It's a good design. Weaknesses, it's one of the few brands where I feel the price is way off. You are paying $700 for a time-only watch with a quartz movement. And sure, it's a Tiger's Eye dial or a marble dial, but considering almost all other brands in this list will get you a fully mechanical movement plus a steel bracelet for the same or less, this is just objectively on the expensive side. Second weakness, right now, case is all they have. So for now, it's a one-hit wonder, and that's a fair call-out. You are a dress watch person, you're a first mover, you're a lover of the 70s and 60s, you want simplicity, and you press your shirts. If you ever buy a Patek, it's going to be a Ellipse, not a Nautilus. The Cartier Santos Dumont is also going to speak to you. It's that refinement and old school suit plus vest that speaks to you. You are a person that might someday buy a bespoke umbrella from Fox Umbrellas. Watchmaking is manufacturing. Watchmaking is cost. Everything you do to a watch in the production adds to cost. If you want a ceramic bezel instead of aluminium, that adds cost. If you want a polished flank on the case, that adds cost. Unimatic leverages this understanding brilliantly to their advantage. How? Well, they've got an ultra simple case with very few extra bevels, not a lot of extra polish because it's cheaper to produce, but because you position your watch as a tool watch, it works perfectly. Unimatic do field watches and dive watches, and everything is minimalist, sandblasted, satinated, or brushed. There are no ceramic bezels. They have fairly basic case shapes. They are so basic that some brands might almost consider them blanks or unfinished. The design language is even more minimalist than Nomos. Inside, you're going to find different movements. They are all workhorse movements. There are no bells and whistles. No matter which watch you pick, their design language is incredibly consistent. And if you're into that ultra simple look, they have a diver or field watch for you. I just love how you have a brand that doesn't try to spice up their watches with premium features. They haven't tried to sell an upscale model, not to my knowledge at least. They haven't made a display caseback premium pretty movement inside. They know their lane and they stick to it. Weaknesses. Not one watch with a steel bracelet. It straps all the way. That also keeps the price down, but I do believe that some models would benefit from a steel bracelet option. Other than that, the very minimalist style just isn't for everybody. It's not white paint on a white wall kind of territory, but for some people it might feel it's the case. It's only a weakness, of course, in the eye of some beholders. It's not an objective truth. Who are they for? This is an everyday carry watch brand. This is for people who have a tactical pen, a Leatherman multi-tool, and a belt that can function as a can opener. That's how hard this brand goes on tool watches and utility. That's the one customer. They have a second customer, which is the brutalist minimalist. There's an artsiness and architectural mindset to this that I think a small group of people also, to whom they will appeal. Those were some of the brands in the sub $1,500 space that I've personally had experience with and my thoughts about them. There's no truth about this. I have a perspective. I share it. So now I'm curious what your perspective is on these brands. Share your thoughts in the comments. Like, subscribe. Cheers.